So even though we're very interested in ourselves, in the grand scheme of things, all of humanity, we're part of a bigger thing. And if you look at the living things on Earth, all of humanity together is 0.01% of the mass of living things. And this 0.01% still gives a lot of challenges in terms of like keeping our world such that we'll enjoy it and that our kids would enjoy it. And what could really help us is the thing that is like 90% of the living things on Earth, which are plants and trees. And they could be a big help if we take care of them properly, and it could have a big role in the challenge of climate change. And the expert looking at the implications of that and what we could do about it, Rafael Stern, who will be speaking to us next.
Hello. So my name is Rafael Stern, and I am from Brazil. I was born and raised in Rio de Janeiro, and now I'm doing a PhD here in the Weizmann Institute in Environmental Sciences in the lab of Professor Dan Yakir. We study how the vegetation affects the climate, how the climate and the vegetation interact, and the role it plays in climate change and in global warming. So being born and growing in a place like Rio, full of forests and waterfall, beaches, hikes, it made me care a lot about the world and the challenges it faces. One of the people that most inspired me in my whole life was my grandfather, Marcus Stern. He's today 90 years old, he's a pharmacist, and his whole life he worked developing medicines made from plants. So my first memories of my childhood are me and my grandfather. I was very little, and he was teaching me how to grow a garden. He was teaching me how to take care of the plants, the importance of the plants, and all the secrets of the plants. His eyes were shining when he spoke about a place, about the Amazon. When he spoke about the Amazon, I started to imagine this wonderful place full of animals and plants with all their colors and sounds, and my dream was to go there. So after I finished my first degree in geography in Rio, I went to the Amazon to do a master's. During my master's, I studied how the atmospheric particles emitted by the forest fires affect the climate. But then, 2.5 years ago, I was accepted to do a PhD here at the Weizmann Institute. It was a very happy day in my life. I started to dream and to imagine how it would be to arrive here. I've seen the campus before, so I imagined myself entering the campus, dressing a white lab coat, becoming a scientist in one of the world's top institutions. And in my very first day, I arrived here. I met Dan Yakir. He said, "Okay, welcome. Let's start your PhD. I want you to go to a driving license school and take a truck driving license." I said, okay, very funny. Okay, where's my white lab coat? He said, no, I'm serious. You need to take a truck driving license. And actually, since then, I had, this is me. I had great adventures driving this 12-ton truck across the roads and the forests in Israel, changing oil of the generator's engine, filling barrels of diesel. One of the first conclusions of my PhD is the smell of diesel is so strong that in order to take it from the skin, you need to wait for the skin cells to die and be replaced by others. It's So it's really like mixing all the microbiology and everything. I want to come back. Because actually, what I very soon understood is that I was being part of a very unique and special project in the world. Because this truck is actually a mobile laboratory that we, with all these equipments inside, that we can measure all the exchanges and the influences of the surface in the desert. We can measure fluxes of CO2, of water vapor, of temperature, of radiation, of energy, a lot of things. And this is very important. So let's, for a minute, imagine a desert, okay? A desert, when we think about a desert, we think about aridity, right? Drought, a place without life. And Israel is a place with a lot of deserts, right? But in the past century, Israel has planted millions of trees in the desert. And when we think about trees, we think about life, green, photosynthesis. And this is right, okay? Trees are good, they prevent soil erosion, provide habitat for animals, provide leisure for the population, fresh air, oxygen. This is all right. But the actual effects of planting trees in the desert can be very complex, can be contradictory, and need to be approached in a broad manner. So let's imagine this, okay? The deserts, they have a very bright surface, and the tree and the forest, they have a dark surface. So when we go to the sun with a white shirt or with a black shirt, we feel much warmer with the black shirt, right? This is because the dark colors, they absorb more energy. They absorb the radiation. So if we cover the desert, which was bright and used to reflect a lot of radiation back to the space, with a dark forest, we start to absorb more radiation. We start to keep more energy in the system. And if you have more energy in a system, we are actually heating the system. But if we go there and measure the temperature inside the forest and the temperature in the desert just outside the forest, the desert is much warmer than inside the forest. And this was a very intriguing question that Danyaki and his group for many years tried to answer. And what happens? Like the trees, they need to keep their temperature low in order to keep good rates of activity, good rates of photosynthesis. And most of the trees in the world do it by transpiration, sweating, just like our bodies. So the trees take up liquid water from the soil, release it as vapor to the atmosphere, and in this process, it dissipates the energy, the heat. But the trees in the desert, they don't have enough water to do it. So the question remained, how do the trees in the desert keep their rates of activity low and high by keeping their temperature cool? So after many years of investigation, Dan and other scientists in the group in the past found out a very interesting mechanism. The trees in the desert are very sparse, okay? It's not like the Amazon, very dense forest, tall. It's not that green carpet above the desert. It's very sparse, very heterogenic. So when the wind blows over the forest, it blows in a very mixed, in a very turbulent way. And the hot air that was heated by the radiation, the hot air is lighter, is less dense. It wants to go up. And this pattern of wind helps the hot air to go up, so it dissipates the energy by a huge flux of hot air, of temperature, of bubbles of hot air going up to the atmosphere. But since we cannot have vacuum, and so we cannot have an empty space like there in the forest, the air surrounding the forest must come to replace it. So now we create a new pattern of atmospheric circulation. And this is very important and can have dramatic consequences to the climate. So for example, Gil Yosef, a scientist in my group, simulated in a computer model planting a forest like we have in Israel in the Sahara Desert, which is much bigger. And this new pattern of atmospheric circulation brought moist air from the ocean surrounding the Africa, and it created more rain in the computer model. So the forest could be creating its own rain. So for example, in the Amazon, where I worked in my master's, this is exactly what happens there. We have very high rates of rain, even 3,000 kilometers away from the source, which is the ocean, because the forest is recycling the rain. And 20% of the Amazon was already destroyed. And most of the scientists agree that if 40% of the Amazon forest is destroyed, the remaining 60%, without touching it, could collapse because of the disruption of this mechanism of rain recycle. So this is very important. So to understand all this, we need to measure the fluxes. So we measure the wind direction and velocity. We measure radiation coming from the sun and coming from the surface. We measure concentration of gases like CO2 and water vapor, atmospheric pressure, humidity, temperature, everything. But most of the places in the world that do it, like in the Amazon, Europe, United States, do it with towers, which are fixed in the forest. they take months to be built. A lot of infrastructure, a lot of work. It's very complex, and they are fixed in one spot in the forest. But we have a unique thing in the world. We have a mobile laboratory. So inside the truck, we have this mast, this antenna. We can raise it up to the height of 28 meters. You just need to be above the top of the trees. And we can, in a few hours of very hard work, but we can, in a few hours of work, set up a complete measurement station as we have in all of the places in the world. And in another few hours, we can fold it, take the truck to another forest, and set it up again. So we can virtually have as many stations as we want anywhere. And this is a very, very unique and special laboratory in the world that allows us to do great measurements and achieve great knowledge in the science. So another example, Shaniro Hatin, another scientist from my group, found out that because of the large-scale plantation of trees in Israel, nowadays we have 30%, up to 30% less water available in the ecosystem because the trees are taking the water, they're using the water. But it doesn't mean that planting trees is a bad idea. We just need to know which kind of trees to plant, how to plant, and where to plant. And this is exactly what my PhD is about. I am comparing 4 different types of vegetation: an artificial pines forest, a natural Mediterranean forest, an agriculture field, and a grassland. So we can check which kind of land use, this is how we call, which kind of use that we make of the soil will bring the benefits that we want regarding temperature, rain, everything. Another project that we just started is to measure the climatic influence of covering the desert with solar panels. And I'm sure in the future we will have very interesting results. I just came back from a 3-week campaign in the desert, very intensive, but also very interesting. But besides science, one thing that really moves me is poetry. I think a work, a creation, is only complete when we contemplate it. And I think that poetry is the contemplation of life, of beauty. So therefore, I would like to conclude quoting a great Brazilian poet who inspires me a lot. Todo jardim começa com um sonho de amor. Antes que qualquer árvore seja plantada, ou qualquer lago seja construído, é preciso que as árvores e os lagos tenham nascido dentro da alma. Quem não tem jardins por dentro, não planta jardins por fora, e nem passeia por eles. Every garden starts with a dream about love. Before any tree is planted or any lake is built, it is necessary that trees and lakes are born inside the soul. Whoever don't have gardens inside cannot plant gardens outside, and neither walk by them. Rubem Alves. Thank you.
I have to tell you that in the memories that I have from the extended family, this is very, very memorable. This is very touching. So now that you heard and met Rafael, I have a riddle for you. Okay, he was saying that the day that he interviewed to Weizmann and got accepted was one of the happiest in his life, right? I can tell you it was also a very happy day for myself. Can you guess why? Because I was interviewing him. I just made the connection now.